Hi, welcome to lesson 17b, Rates of Change. The goal of today's lesson is to learn how to use calculus to solve problems involving rates of change in the real world. So we've looked at rates of change of displacement with respect to time, which is s prime of t, which is also written as v of t, the velocity. And beyond that, we've looked at s double prime of t, which is v prime of t, which is then, of course, acceleration. So we've looked at those kind of rates of change a lot. And so today we're going to be taking a look at some very, very brief definitions and some vocabulary around other rates of change. So suppose, for example, we've got a boat moored in a harbor, and of course the boat, I'm of course one of the world's greatest artists. So we have a boat moored in a harbor, and there are waves, and it's going up and down. We could then describe the change in height, I don't know, above a certain marker, the change in height by h of t, or sorry, the height would be h of t, I guess h prime of t would be the change in height over a certain, maybe a water level of some sort. We could take a look at maybe a person's heart rate, and I know that's quite the beautiful heart here. And we could look at that as perhaps r prime of t as the heart rate changes, etc. We could take a look at the change of the height of a person sitting on a roller coaster with respect to horizontal distance moves. So we could have some sort of roller coaster like this, very boring and basic. And so we could take a look at the height, so the change in height with respect to time as the person on the roller coaster goes down the hill, example, but we're looking at the height of it with respect to the horizontal distance that it moves along the track. There are also business applications that we look at, and the basic business sort of models. We look at X as the number of items produced. We look at C of X as the cost of producing the X items. We look at lowercase p of X, that's the demand function or the price function. So this is the price, the selling price per item for producing X items. Okay, so it's the selling price. They call that the demand function, but it's more or less the price function. We look at capital R of X, which is the revenue function. So that's revenue from the revenue from selling X items. And so revenue is then the number of items sold multiplied by the price per item. So the number of items multiplied by the demand function will give you the revenue function. We look at capital P of X, that's the profit function, and that's the profit from selling X items, and the profit is equal to the revenue received minus the cost of producing those items. Break even, if you're looking for, when is this company ever going to be profitable, when's the break even point? Well, the break even point is when the revenue equals the cost. Okay, so the revenue received equals the cost of producing. There is when you're breaking even, and more revenue after that will then give you in a situation where you're going to end up getting some sort of profit. Calculus-wise, we look at a few things like marginal cost. And the marginal cost is basically the rate of change of cost per item. And it is approximately equal to the increase in cost in producing one more item. Okay, it's approximate, and we can do some examples like that in class tomorrow, so we can see how it is pretty close to being the same thing. We can also look at marginal revenue. And the marginal revenue is the rate of change of revenue per item. And it is approximately equal to the change in revenue from selling one more item. And then, of course, we have the marginal profit. And that marginal profit is once again the rate of change of profit per item, and it is approximately equal to the change in profit from selling one more item. Okay, so we're going to take a look at some of these things. We'll look at some examples, real-life examples of heart rates, or boats rising and falling, or roller coaster heights, or whatever it may be, heights on Ferris wheels, etc., etc., or maybe even the heart rate increasing as we go over a roller coaster. And then we'll take a look at a few business sort of scenarios where we're trying to find the marginal revenue or the marginal profit from selling certain things or renting things, etc. So we're going to be looking at that in a bit more detail tomorrow. So in the meantime, what we're going to do is, what I'm going to ask you to do is, I'm going to ask you to look at example 3 on page 423. Then look at questions 1 to 4 on page 424, followed by reading through and listening to the self-tutor in example 4 on page 425. Then on page 425 to 426, look at questions 5, 8, 9, and 11. Kind of get an idea of what we're going to be looking at and tackling tomorrow. And then look at example 5 on page 427, followed by looking at questions 13 and 15 on page 427. So that's about all we have to do for today. The majority of the work will be dealing with examples, but just getting that vocabulary out of the way is a bit of a hurdle. So that's all done and good, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you in class.